My name is Nancy, and I'm an assistant professor at Chicago's University of Chicago. I'm 32 years old. Academic success, a strong support system, and a city that feels like home have all put my life in order. However, I must admit that my history is a complex web that continues to cast a shadow over my present. Looking back on a childhood I'd prefer not remember sometimes make me feel like I'm teetering on the brink of a deep abyss. My parents raised me in a warm home in a rural Indiana town, and I have clear memories of my formative years there. Those were the days when I could feel the love of those around me, and my heart was filled with joy. To me, my mother was everything. She had an unspoken way of making things better, was intelligent, and compassionate. My father was a wonderful spouse and father before my mother's sudden passing altered our family dynamic. It felt as if the very foundations were broken when Mom passed away. At 15 years old, the pain of loss was too much to take. I could see the anguish engulfing my dad. He was absolutely crushed. He was too distraught to find the words to console me. He went in search of comfort elsewhere, and shortly after we welcomed Catherine into our life. Not only was Catherine an unfamiliar face, but she was also icy, manipulative, and violent. It was the day she stepped foot in our home that I will never forget. As I sat on the porch steps, a battered book in my hands, I strained to comprehend what was going on around me. Catherine got out of the vehicle exuding an ostentatious confidence that unsettled me. I think my dad was hoping she would make up for my mom's absence because he seemed relieved to see her. But I was no longer happy as a child when she came. It didn't take long for Catherine to make her presence known. Just being there made it so eerily quiet. She didn't even have to yell or be very nasty. Her contemptuous remarks and her knack for making an issue out of nothing were the first sparks. Once a place where laughing resounded through the house, now it seemed like every corner held tension. Her brutality quickly became worse. Catherine would make an extra effort to annoy me. I still recall the day she destroyed all of my possessions, including my most treasured books, toys, and clothing. Her physical agony was the worst since it was always inflicted in ways that were simple to hide, and the damage was always minor enough to be blamed on accidents. I realized very fast that I had to remain silent despite the pain. My father would not acknowledge the reality, no matter how many times I sought his assistance. I could always count on him to become irate and dismiss me as being ungrateful or hallucinating if I'd brought up Catherine's actions. He was unable or unwilling to perceive the truth of the situation due to his engrossment in his grief and Catherine's manipulative charms. One event stands out in my mind. My instructor, Miss Jenkins, saw the cuts and bruises on my arms and the despair in my eyes. She came up to me tenderly and asked if I was okay. I couldn't risk upsetting Catherine anymore. Her threats had already made me quite afraid. I pretended everything was perfect when in reality it was anything but. Miss Jenkins's decision to step in was the last straw. A meeting was set up at school after she contacted my father. If only he could see reason and do something, I would have been happy. Upon my father's arrival, however, I was further punished by being locked in my room and accused of lying. More painful than any physical injury was the mental scar from the one person whose job it was to protect me, the one who disbelieved me. Because I was hopeless and had nowhere else to go, I made a choice that would alter the course of my life forever. My grandma was in Chicago, so I contacted her. Throughout my life, she had consistently shown as a symbol of love and security. The hostile environment I had experienced as a child was in sharp contrast to her home. I poured my soul out to her in a letter, hoping she would grasp the seriousness of my predicament. My grandma wasted no time acting upon receiving the letter. After she demanded permission to reside with me, she went to Indiana to confront my father. My grandma's love and resolve won out in the end, even though my dad was hesitant, and Catherine was against it. I hadn't felt even a hint of optimism in a long time. Leaving that place and gathering my possessions was like emerging from a nightmare. The house that had served as both my sanctuary and my solitary confinement was now being abandoned. Relocating to Chicago was like stepping into a whole new reality, one where security and love weren't abstract concepts. I had escaped the clutches of Catherine's cruelty and my father's indifference. I was moving toward a future where I hoped to heal from the scars of my past. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter that would force me to confront my past head-on and find the strength to stand up for myself. Moving to Chicago marked the start of a new chapter in my life. My grandmother's house was like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of fear pressing down on me. Her home, filled with warmth and the smell of freshly baked cookies, was everything my childhood home had not been. My grandmother, Margaret, was in her late 70s, but her spirit was as vibrant as ever. She had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world. Her home was a cozy 2-story house on a tree-lined street with a garden full of colorful flowers and a swing set that reminded me of happier times. From the moment I arrived, it was clear that my life was about to change. Margaret welcomed me with open arms, and her love was like a balm to my wounded heart. She listened patiently as I recounted the horrors I had endured, never once doubting me or brushing off my pain. For the first time in years, I felt heard and understood. Despite the warmth of her home, adjusting to life in a new city was challenging. Chicago was bustling and loud, a far cry from the quiet town in Indiana where I had grown up. I had to navigate a new school, new friends, and a new routine, but Margaret was my constant support. Her presence made the transition smoother. One of the first things I did was enroll in the local high school. It was daunting to start over, but I was determined to make the most of this fresh start. The school was big, and I felt like a small fish in a vast ocean. But Margaret encouraged me to join clubs and make friends, which helped me slowly adjust to my new life. Despite the new environment, there were moments when the past would creep back in. The fear of Catherine's retaliation never completely left me, and there were nights when I would wake up drenched in sweat, reliving the worst moments of my life. But Margaret's soothing presence and gentle words helped me find the strength to face those fears. My grandmother's support went beyond emotional comfort. She made sure I had everything I needed to succeed academically and personally. She helped me with my homework, encouraged me to pursue my interests, and even took me shopping for new clothes. Her generosity and kindness were a stark contrast to the neglect I had experienced before. Despite the nurturing environment, there were times when I felt overwhelmed. I was carrying the weight of my past while trying to build a future. Margaret's unwavering support gave me the strength to push through, but there were moments when the trauma felt like an insurmountable barrier. Things seemed to settle down, and I began to find my footing. My grades improved, and I started to make friends who accepted me for who I was. But just as I was starting to feel stable, a new challenge emerged. My grandmother fell ill. It was a sudden and severe illness that required hospitalization. The news was a blow. Margaret had always been my rock, and seeing her in a hospital bed was a harsh reminder of how fragile life could be. I spent countless hours at her bedside, praying for her recovery and trying to stay strong despite the fear and uncertainty. During this difficult time, my father and Catherine reappeared in my life, this time with a different agenda. They reached out to me, seeking to claim my grandmother's house and the inheritance she had left behind. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I had thought that the worst of my past was behind me, but now I faced a new battle. The thought of losing the only stable home I had known since leaving Indiana was terrifying. Catherine and my father were relentless. They tried to manipulate the situation, claiming that Margaret's will was invalid and demanding access to the house and the $500,000 inheritance left to me. Margaret's condition worsened, and I had to focus on her well-being while trying to handle the legal mess that had suddenly become part of my life. I sought help from legal advisors to understand my rights and the best way to protect what was rightfully mine. It was a difficult time balancing my grandmother's care and fighting against my father and Catherine's claims. The emotional strain was immense, and I often found myself on the edge of breaking down. Yet, amidst all this turmoil, I found strength in Margaret's teachings. She had always been a fighter, and her resilience became my guiding light. Every day, I would visit Margaret, read to her, and talk about the good times we had shared. I hoped that my presence would give her some comfort and strength, even as I struggled with the external pressures. My grandmother's illness was a stark reminder of how precious and fragile the things we hold dear can be. As I navigated these challenges, I realized that the true battle was not just against my father and Catherine, but against the lingering shadows of my past. It was a struggle to reclaim my sense of self, my right to a stable and safe life, and to honor the memory of the person who had always been my beacon of hope. The fight was far from over, but I knew that with Margaret's strength and my own growing resilience, I could face whatever came next. As my grandmother's health deteriorated, the battle for the house and the inheritance became more intense. The stress of managing her illness while dealing with my father and Catherine's demands was overwhelming. It felt like I was fighting a war on two fronts, one to save Margaret's life and the other to protect what she had left me. My father and Catherine were relentless. They began by threatening legal action, claiming that Margaret's will was invalid due to some obscure technicalities they had discovered. They argued that the house and the $500,000 inheritance were rightfully theirs. The stress of these constant threats and legal maneuvers felt like a never-ending storm cloud hanging over me. Margaret's hospital room became a place of refuge and despair. I would sit by her bed, clutching her hand, and try to keep her spirits up. It was hard to see her so frail, her once vibrant energy now diminished. Despite my best efforts, I could feel the weight of my past and the current pressures crashing down on me. But I refused to give up. Margaret had always been my pillar of strength, and I was determined to honor her legacy by standing up for myself and her wishes. The legal battles were exhausting. I hired a lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, who specialized in estate disputes. He was compassionate and understood the emotional toll the situation was taking on me. He guided me through the complexities of the law, preparing documents and evidence to defend my grandmother's will. Mr. Jacobs explained that the inheritance and the house were legally mine as long as we could prove the validity of the will and defend against the challenges from my father and Catherine. Every day, I would juggle hospital visits with meetings with Mr. Jacobs. It was a grueling routine, and there were times when I felt like I was on the brink of collapse. The pressure was immense, and the legal threats from my father and Catherine seemed to grow more aggressive. One afternoon, while going through Margaret's belongings in the house, I found a hidden envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Margaret, addressed to me. It was a powerful and emotional message that revealed a lot about her thoughts and intentions. In the letter, she spoke of her love for me, her pride in my accomplishments, and her wish for me to stand strong, despite the challenges I faced. Margaret had anticipated the possibility of conflict and had left specific instructions on how to handle any legal disputes. The letter included details about her will and the reasons behind her decisions. It was a reminder of her strength and her unwavering belief in my ability to overcome adversity. The letter became a source of strength for me during this tumultuous time. It reaffirmed my commitment to protect her legacy and uphold her wishes. With the letter in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was clear that Margaret had prepared for this, and her words gave me the resolve I needed to continue fighting. I met with Mr. Jacobs to discuss the new evidence and strategize our next steps. The letter was a crucial piece of evidence that demonstrated Margaret's clear intentions and her understanding of the potential challenges. The legal proceedings became more intense. My father and Catherine used every trick in the book to undermine our case. They hired their own lawyers who tried to discredit Margaret's will and question my credibility. It was a painful and humiliating process, but I refused to back down. Throughout this period, I leaned heavily on my support system. Friends from the university, colleagues, and even former teachers offered their encouragement and assistance. Their support was invaluable in helping me maintain my sanity and stay focused on the battle at hand. Despite the emotional and physical exhaustion, there were moments of light. Margaret's condition showed small improvements, and she was occasionally able to communicate with me, even if just through gestures. Her presence, even in her weakened state, was a reminder of the love and strength that had guided me through so much. One particularly pivotal moment came when Mr. Jacobs managed to arrange a mediation session with my father and Catherine. The goal was to reach a settlement and avoid a lengthy court battle. I hoped that a direct conversation might lead to an understanding or resolution. During the mediation, emotions ran high. My father was visibly agitated, and Catherine's cold demeanor remained unchanged. I presented the letter from Margaret along with other evidence to reinforce our position. The letter had a profound impact on the proceedings. It was clear that Margaret's wishes were legally and emotionally compelling. The mediation ended with no immediate resolution, but the session made it evident that my father and Catherine were aware of the strength of our position. They seemed to reconsider their approach, realizing that continuing the battle might not be in their best interest. As I left the mediation room, I felt a mix of hope and apprehension. The battle was far from over, but I had taken significant steps to defend Margaret's legacy. The struggle had tested my limits, but it had also revealed my inner strength and resilience. The fight for the house and the inheritance was far from over, but I knew that with Margaret's guidance, Mr. Jacobs' expertise, and my own determination, I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The past had shaped me, but it was the present and the future that I was determined to protect and build. The culmination of the legal battles came sooner than I expected. Despite the challenges, my determination and Margaret's letter played a crucial role in turning the tide. The mediation session had shaken my father and Catherine, and their once aggressive stance began to waver. It became clear that continuing their fight was not only futile, but could also further damage their reputation. One crisp autumn morning, Mr. Jacobs called with some surprising news. My father and Catherine had decided to settle out of court. They had agreed to withdraw their claims on the house and the inheritance in exchange for a modest financial settlement. It was not the outcome I had originally hoped for, but it was a victory nonetheless. The house and the inheritance would remain mine, and I could finally put the past to rest. The settlement agreement was finalized, and the legal documents were signed. As I walked through the empty rooms of Margaret's house, I felt a profound sense of closure. The house, once a battleground of my past traumas, now represented my resilience and the love Margaret had given me. I knew that moving forward, I had the power to shape my own future. Margaret's passing was a deeply sorrowful event. Her death left a void in my life that no one could fill. Yet her legacy lived on through the strength she had instilled in me and the lessons she had taught me. I organized a small ceremony to honor her memory, inviting close friends and family who had supported me through the trials. It was a poignant and emotional moment, reflecting on the journey we had shared. With the house now securely in my possession, I made it a priority to transform it into a place of healing and peace. I spent time renovating and decorating, creating a home that honored Margaret's memory while reflecting my own growth and independence. Each room I restored felt like a step toward reclaiming my sense of self and moving beyond the shadows of my past. One evening, while sitting in the sunlit living room, I thought back on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the battles, the triumphs. It all seemed like a distant memory compared to the tranquility I now felt. From being a scared child confined in an abusive home to a strong lady who had taken back her life, I had gone full circle. Over time, my father and Catherine became less present in my life. They were less influential. Their decisions had repercussions, and they had to live with them. Personally, I had realized that although I couldn't change other people's behavior, I could manage my own reaction to it. I will never forget the wisdom Margaret had imparted to me and the inner fortitude I had developed. My experiences at the University of Chicago allowed me to continue my work while also enhancing my teaching with depth and empathy. Though it had molded me, my background had also strengthened my resolve to be of service to others and create a positive world. My own experiences served as the basis for the stories of perseverance and overcoming hardship that I shared with my pupils, and it brought me great joy to witness their own paths to strength. The Chicago mansion became a representation of my individual triumph. Standing firm and never giving up became the new mantra at this once ordinary spot, which had transformed from a mere repository of memories. The love and fortitude that had helped me get through the worst of times were always front and center when I strolled through its chambers. My life's narrative is filled with both overcoming adversity and emerging stronger on the other side. What follows is a narrative of perseverance in the face of hardship, acceptance of the love all around, and the realization that our future selves should be the ones we build. Through it all, I had grown more strong and tough in the face of deception and pain. Looking back, I see that the journey was about more than just battling for an inheritance or a property. Reconnecting with my identity and paying tribute to the people who had supported me deeply were major themes. The last chapter isn't simply about the victories. It's also about the contentment and serenity that comes from having lived my life to the fullest, without compromising my principles.